Yeah, you guys can have a seat. Good job. Well done. Limiting the amount of instructions I need to give. That's a good thing. All right. Open up your Bibles to Genesis 13. Man, you guys have no idea. I said that the second time I've said that today. It was just as exciting that time. All right, Genesis 13. Here we go. All right, so we're going to catch up to where we were. So David did an amazing job with the sermon last week talking about Abram. And we often think of Abram as, and the Bible describes him as a man of faith. And I think one of the more helpful things that we see as we study the life of Abram is that even in the middle of a guy who had a life of faith, he has these moments where he just blows it. At the top of the moments where he just blows it is the decision that he makes in Egypt that we talked about last week, where he decides to tell everybody that his wife is his sister. Right? There's a whole bunch of things you could do that are dumb. That's up there. Right? And what he does, and so David talked about, he puts the promise at risk. What's going to happen? And what we see is that God is faithful to his promises, even when we're faithless. And Paul says this in Titus, right? Even if we are faithless, he remains faithful. But the question that we get to at the end of chapter 12 is, what's Abram going to do now? Right? He goes down to Egypt. He totally blows it. What's next? And we're going to see as we move through today, he's going to go back to where it all started. He's going to go back to where he heard the voice of God. He's going to go back to this place where he built these altars and he remembers who God is. And if the life of Abram teaches us anything really, really substantial, there are a couple of really important things we see in his life. But one of the things is this. I say often here, when we think about our Christian walk, when we think about our spiritual life, it is often best to think about the Christian life in terms of years, and then as you age, 5 years, 10 years, decades, not days. And we see this in the life of Abram, right? Because just a few, not too long prior to chapter 13, we're going to see him making some really bad decisions. But then we're going to get in chapter 13, and it's going to be one of the few places in Abram's life where he really gets it right. He's going to do it right, and that's excellent. But there's a point here for us. If you ever had these moments, and I bet you have, where you feel like one day you are just like in touch with the Holy Spirit, you're making these great decisions, things are going great, I got it. Me and God, we're like this, I'm listening, I'm hearing the voice of God. And then literally the next day, all the wheels fly off the bus. Some of you may be like, that's like hour to hour for me. It's the coming to worship and hearing great instruction, or at least average instruction from the scriptures, and then going out and losing your temper with your kids, or losing your temper with your spouse, or getting mad in traffic, or just, and you go, what is going on? And we totally understand what Paul is saying when he says, wretched man that I am, who will save me from this body of death? That's the tension that we're seeing in the life of Abram. And we're going to have a point in chapter 13 where this is going to really play itself out through his decision-making. So much of our Christian life is really measured by the way we make day-to-day decisions. Big decisions are super important, for sure, and this is one of those. But all decisions to a Christian matter, every single one. Every single decision is supposed to be impacted by the way, by our confession, what we confess that we believe. And so we're going to see this, that Abram is teaching us in this lesson. If we're going to boil the whole chapter down to just two words, it's going to be this: trust God, even when you don't see the outcome of the decisions that you're making. So let's read chapter 13 together. If you didn't bring a Bible, normally we have some here in the pews, but we thought it would be safer if we didn't do that. So we want to recommend an app on your phone called YouVersion. You can download that. It's got the whole Bible on there, easy to read. You're welcome to use that. Or if you need a Bible to take home to bring back next week, we have some we will give you for free. Just catch me or Jacob, and we'll be sure we get you a Bible on your way out the door. Okay, so let's read Genesis chapter 13 together. Here's what it says. So, Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him into the Negev. Now, Abram was very rich in livestock and silver and in gold. And he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning. This is back at the beginning of chapter 12, right, when he heard from God. Between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at the first. And there, Abram called upon the name of the Lord. And Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so the land could not support both of them dwelling together. For their possessions were so great, they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. Then Abram said to Lot, Let there be no strife between you and me, between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, I will go to the right. Or if you take the right hand, I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now, the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. The Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward, for all the land that you see, I will give to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Let's pray together. Father, we pray that our hearts might be receptive, our ears opened, and our eyes awakened to the beauty of your word, that it might transform us through the power of the Holy Spirit. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So there are two human players in this chapter, right? Abram, Lot. For sure, God's in it. God's the main character of the Bible. But two human characters. And what we're going to see from these two characters is a real contrast in decision making. How you make decisions in your day-to-day life. You're going to see a real difference between the way Lot does it and the way Abram does it. Because it is critical that we understand decision making in our lives. And what we're going to see, like we said at the beginning, is that we trust God. The really tricky part is that we trust God even when we can't see the outcome of the decisions that we're making. But that's the hard part, isn't it? And so let's look at first what Lot does here. Lot is going to teach us, through the way he makes decisions, this one principle, and it's this. You don't blindly trust your gut. Trusting your gut has got to be some of the worst advice anyone has ever given anybody in the history of bad advice that people give people. Let me give you an example of why you shouldn't trust your gut. We had just gotten married, my wife and I. We've been married about 3 or 4 years, and we decided to go on vacation to Pigeon Forge, which is one of our favorite places to go. When we went to Pigeon Forge, we decided that we were going to go to Dollywood. If you don't know what Dollywood is, it's an enormous theme park, okay? The problem with me is that I am cheap. And so Dollywood doesn't just cost you to get into the park. No. You've got to pay to park to get into the park, right? And it was expensive. And so I had this brilliant idea. I said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to park, and it was just totally a gut instinct, right? I literally never seen anybody do this, and no one had advised me to do this. I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to park, like outside of the park, and then we're going to walk in. Now, if you've ever been there, you know that is a horrible idea. And the reason that's a horrible idea, because it's 9 miles worth of parking lot before you ever get there. And then there's just nothing between there and here. And so it literally was like 2 to 2.5 miles of walking. And my wife, now here's the best part about this, right? My wife says, I don't think we should do that. I think we should just pay and park because I'm not sure there's going to be any parking closed. Me and my gut, we said, no, we'll be fine, trust me. And so we park outside of the park. And the whole time we're walking in summer into the park, a long way, I can just feel my wife being right. Like, that's a feeling. It's a real tangible feeling. And so we're walking the whole time. She never said a word, and to this day she hasn't, except for me telling her, I'm going to use this illustration. And she went, oh, okay. And so at the end of the day, that's a kind of a funny example. But man, we can think of a ton of ways where that's just horrible advice, can't we? I mean, really, just the hunches that we have, the gut instinct that we have to make a decision, it's almost never the right thing, especially not when we've been given the counsel of the Word of God, especially not when it involves real, serious life decisions. Well, what we're going to see Lot do is trust his gut. Let me show you how I got here. Look at what Lot does. First, So we're going to talk about the problem in just a second when we talk about Abraham and how he handles the problem. But when you look at Lot, Lot's been given the choice of what he's going to do. There's a predictable pattern in the Bible that occurs, and I hope that you recognize it. And if not, I want you to recognize it from now on, and it's really fascinating. So in the garden, Eve was tempted by the serpent, right? And it says what? She looked at the tree, she saw that the tree was good for food, and she took the fruit. And then she ate the fruit, all right? When the sons of God in Genesis 5 that we talked about went to take the daughters of men, they saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took. There's this looking, seeing, taking pattern that happens over and over again in the Bible that's trying to teach us a very important lesson about what it means to trust our eyes versus trusting what God has promised. We're going to see Lot do this. Look at what Lot does. In verse 10, Lot lifted up his eyes, and he saw that the Jordan Valley was good for food. Now, here's the thing. The book of Genesis is full of stories and facts. It's up to us to do the work to see what those facts mean. To understand what it means to lift up his eyes and see beyond the Jordan Valley is really important. And so we've got a map. We didn't have a map in the first service. This is the benefit of two services. There's a map right here. Okay, you see that big body of water that's getting right there? That's the Jordan River, okay? On the right-hand side, east, is the Jordan Valley. All that God had promised was to the left of that big body of water. In other words, God had promised all of the land of Canaan to Abram, right? And Lot looks out over all of the land of Canaan, and you know what he sees? He sees beyond the land of Canaan. Do you see what's happening here? He's looking beyond the promise of God to see what looks good to his eyes. He looks at the land past where God has promised and said, ooh, that looks good. That's what I want. And that's the nature of our sinfulness, isn't it? So much of our sinfulness can be boiled down into doing just that thing. We have God's boundaries that are good and right. We have God's promises that are good and right. And we look beyond the promise to see something that we determine is good and right, and we take it. You could take every sin. Take covetousness. Covetousness is literally looking beyond the boundaries of what God has given you to what someone else has and deciding that what they have is more significant than what God has given you, and so I want that. I want that with an unhealthy sort of want, and so I take it. Now, you could take covetousness, you could take lust, you could take greed, you could take laziness, and all of them somehow are looking beyond the promise of what God has promised you so that you might take something that isn't supposed to belong to you. They had the whole promised land, and Lot looked past the promise, beyond the promise. Kent Hughes said it this way about seeing past the promise here. Kent Hughes said this: Lot was the kind of man that would choose heaven over hell if given the choice, but not heaven over earth. And see, that's the problem with the Christian life. Like if you boil down the gospel to so that you don't go to hell, you should repent and believe the gospel and be saved. Almost everybody wants to do that. I have not met many people in my life that actually really truly think it's better to spend an eternity in torment than it is to be in the presence of Jesus. So if we only make the gospel, or we only make the Christian life, accept Jesus so you don't go to hell, well, I mean, everybody's going to take that, but that's not what Jesus said the Christian life is it? Jesus said the Christian life is to deny yourself and take up your cross and follow him. You know what that means? That means choosing the things of God over the things of the earth. Let me tell you what that looks like. Here's the hard stuff. The Christian life is hard when we do this. Christian life's not super hard if we're just choosing heaven over hell. It's not much of a choice. The real difficulty is in choosing the things of God over the things of this earth. Lot's decision was based on what he thought might be most safe, most profitable, most beneficial. There are a million different decisions that we make in our lives that we may think are safe, profitable, and beneficial, but they are not godly. So, men, the illusion that believing that somehow it's actually better for our families to spend more time at work than it is for our children is only true if you decide not to read the Bible. The decision that somehow the best thing we can give to our children is financial prosperity is only true if you don't read the Bible. The decision that it's better to take a job offer that pays us a little bit more, whether it's male or female, whether it's husband or wife, that pays a little bit more, but takes away time that we might have to serve the kingdom doing other things, is only true if you don't read the Bible. See, God's wisdom is upside down to the world's wisdom. That's how Paul could say the wisdom of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. Because Jesus says, I'm supposed to forsake all that stuff so that I can follow him. For sure we have to work, and we should work. But we are called to be leaders at home, in the home, with our families. We're called to deny ourselves the pleasures, the things that would tempt us from doing what God has called us to do. We're supposed to set those aside. We're supposed to not just look with our eyes. That's what Lot did. He chose the things here. And so he went. Now, the other thing that you see as a pattern in the book of Genesis is that anytime someone goes away from the presence of God, they go east. Okay, so when Adam and Eve were cast out of the garden, they went east. There's nothing wrong necessarily with the direction of east. It's a pattern that the Bible is showing you that you're supposed to see. Oh, Lot made this decision and so went away from the garden that was created here. So he went away, if you will, from the presence of God. So the decision that Lot makes to follow his gut, to see the thing that he thought might be most beneficial, but to ignore the promises of God, ended up leading him away from the presence of God. And that is how life works, isn't it? Those little decisions over the course of my life that I make, these little compromises of what I know is true about the gospel and the Bible and my family, those little decisions every time lead us just little inch steps away from the presence of the holiness of God, if you will, from the sanctifying work of the Holy Spirit. And it's death by 1,000 little cuts that ends up leading us estranged, if you will, from the work of the Holy Spirit and sitting over here frustrated, holding our lives in our hands going, I don't understand what happened. And what happened was we made 1,000 decisions with our gut that didn't involve seeking the counsel of the Word of God. And so Lot trusted his gut. Let's look at what Abram does. Abram trusts what God has promised. And I've already said this, but this is actually kind of rare for a man who is defined by his faith. The great verse that we read in the Old Testament, that we'll read again in the New Testament, is Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Here's a story of Abraham believing God in chapter 13. So let's look and see what he does. First, he's going back to where he met God in the first place. You remember what happened in Egypt, right? He goes down to Egypt. He has the opportunity to just trust in the promise of God, but instead, he says his wife is his sister. Pharaoh gets in trouble. And in spite of Abraham, Abraham is richly blessed. You ever had God bless you in spite of you? If you're a Christian, you could probably think of 1,000,000 times where God has blessed you in spite of you. If you're not a Christian, let me let you in on something. God has blessed you in spite of you. And so we see this happening in Abram's life. He totally blows it, and God blesses him. He walks out of Egypt richer than he was when he walked in, and he completely blew it. It's not a reward for unfaithfulness. It's a God who's faithful to keep the promise that he made. So he goes back. He's walking back from Egypt. He's going in to the promised land. He's going back to where things started in Bethel and Ai. And this is a visual picture of what it means to repent in so many ways. It's almost like Abraham is saying, or Abram, I'm sorry, it's going to be Abraham, spoiler alert. It's like Abram is saying, you know what? I don't know where else to go. So I'm going to go back to where I heard God. I think for so many of us, that's one of the reasons that this sort of gathering is special, right? Because what we do is we remember these experiences that we have. I talk about monuments of grace in the Christian life a lot, that what happens as you walk with the Lord is that he builds these monuments to his grace over the course of your life. It's one of the great advantages of just being a Christian for a little while, is that what happens is that over the course of your life, you get to look back over your life story and see all these ways in which God has been faithful to you. And so you can have greater confidence. He's going to be faithful to me now because he was faithful then and then and then and then and then. So I can trust him because I trusted him in all these points, and he's faithful. It's really, truly one of the great parts about aging in Christ, that as we age, there's supposed to be an increasing maturity in the promises of God that have been wrought by suffering and faithfulness. You experiencing suffering and God demonstrating his faithfulness. And as that pattern happens over the course of your life, you see his grace and his faithfulness, and you trust him more at the end than you did at the beginning. It's how it's supposed to work. It's how it should work. It's not always how it does work, but it's how it should work. right? And so Abram goes back to where he started. And when he gets there, what you see is that now something's changed in Abram. So he's just kind of he's willing to give freely out of this promised land. There's this problem that happens here. They get there and they've got lots of stuff, which is a problem we can all relate to. None of our houses have enough closet space, but it's an even bigger problem with Abram and Lot, because Abram and Lot have got so much stuff that their herdsmen are fighting each other. So you've got, isn't it fascinating? This is kind of it's a neat little aside application that so many of us can be prone to think that an increase in resources can be the answer to our problems. But in this chapter, an increase of resources is the source of the problem. So many times we think, if I just had more money, I'd have less problems. Let me tell you something, Jack. That's not how it works, right? So because what we do is we condition ourselves to believe, if I just had more, then things would be better. And you know what happens when you get more? It's still the same you. Nothing changed about you. You still got the same problems. And so what you've got is Abram and Lot having this problem over the fact that they've been blessed abundantly with tons of possessions. And they've got all these things. And the herdsmen are fighting. And then you get outside pressure, right? Because the Canaanites and the Perizzites are still in the land, which is what that whole aside means. It's like Moses is telling the people, as if it weren't enough, that they literally didn't have enough land for all their sheep and herds and cattle and camels and stuff. Now you've got these other people living in the land, and they're taken from the land too. You got problems inside in the family. You got problems outside in the world, and all of a sudden, it doesn't sound like it's that many years removed from us, right? Inside house problems, outside external problems, and now you've got a real life situation. The Bible is written about real people. And so when you start to see it for what it is, you start to go, wow, this isn't that much unlike me. I mean, I don't have any sheep. My neighbor behind me does. I don't have any sheep. But I can see this. I can see interpersonal conflicts in my family, and then there's these outside pressures that add on top of it. What is Abram going to do? And what's fascinating is first he returns to the place where he worshiped, and he called on the name of the Lord, and then, boom, all of a sudden you see this difference in the way he handles this. He just says, okay, here's what you do. Look, Lot, see whatever you want, and go and take it. And there's this moment where you kind of go, dude, okay, he was promised lots of people, and lots of children, and he literally tries to give away his wife, and God preserves him from that. Like, what's going to happen now? What is going to happen now? Like, is he going to get to keep this land? And he totally is, because there's a big difference between the way Abram's making the decision in 13 and the way Abram made the decision in 12. You see, in 12, first off, he has to distort the truth and violate the integrity of the God that he claims to worship in order to see any sort of safety. And the decision that he makes in 12 is for the sake of his own safety, not for the good of anybody else. He's trying to save his own skin, right? In 13, he just gives freely. Why? Because he's come back, he's worshiped, he's repented. He's called on the name of the Lord, and now he's willing to give this freely and say, take whatever you want, right? We're going to see this happen at least one more time in the life of Abram. It's going to be way more dramatic. I cannot wait to get there. But you're going to hear the voice of God, and he's going to say, Abraham, take your son, your only son whom you love. Go to the place that I will show you and sacrifice him there. At least twice in Abram's life you see this happen, where he's just willing to give it freely. It's how we're supposed to be, isn't it? It's how we're supposed to be, willing to give freely. Why? Because he trusts that God will provide. He trusts the hand of the provider in 13. He gets it right. Ha! How about that? He trusts that God will provide. He's called on the name of the Lord. He's able to give freely. Friends, when we trust God in the decisions that we're making, some really important things happen in our lives. The first one is this. The first one is that we repent. Repentance is a consistent confidence in the promises of God. This is why when we take communion together, after we finish taking communion, or right before we do, when we had the moment of the time of confession, consideration of our sins, I always want to read 1 John 1:9, because it's based in the character of God. What does it say? When we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. You see how this whole thing started? It started with Abraham physically demonstrating his repentance. I want to go back to where I was when I met God. I want to call on the name of the Lord. Friends, repentance should be the daily diet of a Christian. It's what we do. We live lives of repentance because we have been forgiven and will continue to be forgiven. And that is our source of confidence in Christ, that we are new creations in Christ, declared righteous by God because of the work of Christ, because the righteousness of Christ is in us and on us. We repent. Second, when that happens, when we live these lives of repentance, we learn to make decisions with God's heart instead of with our own eyes. Now, how in the world do you do that? Well, first is this: we rest in the truth that God has given us his word, that we might know what it is he has called us to do. So many times people will say things, and I've been as guilty of this, and maybe you have too, of I just wish God would show me what he wants me to do. I just wish I knew what God's will was for my life. I just wish I knew what it was that God was calling me to do. And we never, ever pick this book up. There's literally thousands and thousands and thousands of pages and words and verses and paragraphs and lines of God telling you what he wants you to do. He's literally put it in a book. You know, we think it is so cool that Abraham has these experiences where God literally speaks to him. There are months and years in between these moments of God speaking to Abram. And literally we could live every second being exposed to the word of God, and it sits on our desks and in our bookshelves dusty and unopened, and we wonder why we don't hear from God. And we say, I just wish I could hear from God like Abram did. You have even better. You have the word of God. Read it and listen. And you read passages like, this is the will of God, your sanctification. Passages that say, he has shown you, oh man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, but to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. I didn't make either of those up. That's the New Testament and the Old Testament. You want to know the will of God? Read those two passages and then do. But what we want is for God to just tell us what to do. Specifically, lay it out for us. You don't see that even in the life of a man who was declared just by his faith. You don't see that. We are called to know the word of God. So often, the reason that we don't know the will of God in our lives is because we don't know the God of our lives. Know him. And you'll be able to discern his will, because his will is in his word. We're called to know him, really know him. Friends, there will be times in our lives where life will throw us a curveball, for sure. We're not going to know what to do. If you don't know his word, you will be blind. And it ought not surprise you, because we have all been warned. Know his word. Know what he has called you to do. And then live in light of those things. Believe those promises. Because that's really what Jesus taught us. There's a story that happens in John chapter 20 after the resurrection. It's a guy named Thomas. We all know Thomas. If there's any disciples that I think we connect with better than any of the other disciples, it's Peter, just because Peter was the most stubborn, obstinate, hard-headed individual in the world, and I connect well with Peter. He spoke long before he should have and didn't think nearly enough, and that describes me almost to a T. And Thomas, who says what? After Jesus has been raised, he's heard the reports, and he says, unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails and place my hand into his side, I will never believe. You guys know the story, right? You know what happens? Jesus comes in, and he does what? He says, behold, Thomas. Thomas confesses Jesus is Lord, but then here's the really important part of this deal. Listen to what Jesus teaches Thomas. He says this, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and have yet believed. Raise your hand if you're one of those who have not seen and yet believed. That's us. We are those people, right? right? You see what Jesus is doing? He's going, you need physical proof? Dude, wait. You just wait. Thousands of years from now, people will still believe in me and will have never seen the holes in my hand and the wound in my side. Blessed are those people. That is the Christian life, because that is the essence of faith, right? Evidence of things unseen, the substance, things hoped for. That's what faith is. It's trusting even when you can't see. Trusting God even when you can't see the outcome. Friends, let me tell you a couple of things that I know is true. First, your life is going to be full of hard decisions. There is no avoiding it. Life is about hard decisions in so many ways. Maturity, whether it be spiritual maturity or just acting like the adult God has called us to be, is full of hard decisions. And most of those decisions are almost not even good versus evil. They're good versus best. Those are the really hard ones, right? Your life is going to be full of, let me tell you the second part of that. Your life is going to be full of hard decisions that you probably don't yet have enough faith for. He has called us. Faith is a cultivated thing. It's a thing that we develop, that we practice. And it's practiced over the Christian life. How do we do that? First, study God. Study Him through His Word. Read the Bible. You know, it sounds like a broken record because it's like where half of my sermons land, if not maybe 80% of my sermons land. And if you ever come to me for any sort of time where we might spend just discussing, you know, what's going on in your life, somewhere along the way I want there to be a question that's like, tell me what you're reading in the Bible right now. Tell me what you are reading in the Bible. Here is the reason, because I got nothing. I'm totally out of good advice. I've been out of good advice since before the foundations of the earth. That's what Ephesians tells me. And so I got it. You know what I do have? I have the Word of God. And so do you. And if you are not reading it and you're coming to men for advice, then my role and responsibility, and yours too as you're discipling others, is to point them back to the Word of God. Study God. Really, study Him. Read the Bible. Spend time talking with Him. That's where it starts. That's how we learn to make these decisions. That's how we learn to trust His heart versus trusting our eyes sometimes. Now, here's the other thing. When we learn to make those God-honoring decisions, there will be many times in our lives in those difficult decisions where the difficult decision will not be the most profitable or the most earthly beneficial, if you will, or even the most safe. God has called us to faith. He has called us to live our lives in such a way that we trust Him, not our circumstances, not our ability to make wise decisions, but Him. And the first in those decisions is what we said earlier in the words of Jesus. If any man wishes to come after me, he must deny himself. Nothing seems more contrary to our world than the idea of denying ourselves. Denying ourselves impacts every single aspect of our life. It affects our work, it affects our home life, it affects our diet, it affects our recreation. Denying ourselves is radical. And Jesus knew that. And He calls us to a radical Christian life. A radical Christian life full of faith-filled, ordinary decisions. That's what Christianity is. Deny yourself. Take up your cross. Again, just contrary to the world, right? To prepare for the fact that if they rejected the Savior, they will reject His servants. To live a life of obedience to Christ, constantly crucifying the flesh, if you will, and following Jesus, doing what He did, saying what He said, believing what He has promised us. That's the Christian life. The Christian life is so much more than pray this prayer so that you don't go to hell when you die. So much more than that. It is trusting Jesus more than you trust your own eyes. And when you do, you see Him glorified in your life. That's the Christian life. If you have never repented of your sins and trusted that Jesus, that's the first of those decisions that you make that lead you to a lifetime of decisions that demonstrate that you truly trust God, even when you don't see the outcome. Let's pray.